Story number 1. Reflections in the Shadows. The moment I stepped into the old apartment building on Jackson Avenue in New Orleans, I felt an inexplicable chill that danced along my spine. The wrought iron gates creaked as I pushed them open, revealing a grand yet decaying structure that stood as a testament to a bygone era. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and lingering memories, the perfect setting for a fresh start, or so I hoped. I'm Rebecca Miller, a freelance writer seeking solitude and inspiration in the heart of the Crescent City. The apartment I rented was on the 3rd floor of the historic building, its high ceilings and large windows offering a picturesque view of the bustling streets below. Despite its charm, there was an undeniable aura of mystery that clung to the place, whispering secrets through the cracks in the walls. The first few days were uneventful. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on the balcony, watching the city come alive, and my afternoons nestled in the cozy nook of my living room, typing away on my laptop. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to sense that something was amiss. It started with the minor disturbances, faint noises echoing through the halls, shadows that seemed to move just out of the corner of my eye, and an ever-present feeling of being watched. One chilly December evening, I decided it was time to tackle the basement, a neglected space that the previous tenant had warned me was cluttered with old furniture and forgotten relics. Equipped with a flashlight and a sense of determination, I made my way down the narrow staircase, the wooden steps groaning under my weight. The basement was a cavernous room, filled with the remnants of decades past. Dust-covered boxes and antique furniture lay scattered across the floor, each piece holding its own story. As I began to sort through the clutter, the air grew colder, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. My flashlight flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. As I moved deeper into the basement, I stumbled upon a secluded corner where an old, ornate mirror stood propped against the wall. Intrigued, I approached it, noticing a strange photograph framed within its glass. The photo depicted a man in his early 30s, dressed in a sharp suit, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my heart race. There was something unsettling about his gaze, something that seemed to reach into the very depths of my soul. I reached out to touch the mirror, my fingers grazing the cold glass. Suddenly, the reflection blurred, distorting the man's face until it was unrecognizable. The heavy breathing I had heard earlier grew louder, filling the basement with a suffocating presence. My skin prickled with fear as I realized I wasn't alone. A shadowy figure materialized behind me, its form indistinct yet undeniably human. I spun around, heart pounding, but the basement remained empty, no one in sight. The whispers of heavy breathing persisted, now accompanied by faint, sorrowful moans that echoed through the room. Panic surged through me as the temperature plummeted, my breath visible in the icy air. Desperate to escape, I turned back to the mirror, hoping to confront whatever was haunting this place. As I approached, the mirror became even more opaque, the man's eyes now filled with a profound sadness. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the cacophony of whispers and the sound of my own racing heart. The man's mouth moved, but no words emerged. Instead, his eyes conveyed a silent plea, a desperate longing for something I couldn't comprehend. The air around me seemed to thicken, the presence growing stronger, more insistent. I felt an invisible force pressing against me, urging me to leave, to abandon this place before it was too late. Without warning, the basement door slammed shut, the force of the impact sending me sprawling to the ground. My flashlight extinguished, plunging me into complete darkness. The whispers turned into anguished cries, the sound of footsteps echoing ominously around me. I scrambled to my feet, trying to find a way out, but the room seemed to shift and warp, the walls closing in, trapping me in a nightmare of my own making. In a moment of sheer terror, I bolted towards the door, my hands fumbling with the rusty handle. It wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, their cries turning into screams that pierced through the darkness. Shadows morphed into grotesque shapes, reaching out with invisible hands, their touch cold and unforgiving. I tripped over a fallen box, the impact sending me crashing to the floor. The heavy breathing and the man's sorrowful gaze bore into me, a constant reminder of the unresolved anguish that lingered in this forsaken place. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the true horror of what was happening. I was witnessing the torment of a soul trapped between worlds, unable to find peace. Summoning every ounce of courage, I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. I didn't mean to intrude. The oppressive atmosphere began to lift, the shadows receding, the whispers fading into the background. The basement door creaked open slowly, as if granting me permission to leave. Without looking back, I fled the room, my heart pounding in my chest, the chill of the basement lingering in my bones. Upstairs, I locked the basement door, the memories of that night etched into my mind. Laura, my wife, found me sitting on the floor, clutching the photograph, her eyes wide with fear. "What happened?" she asked, concern etched into her features. I tried to explain, but the words faltered, lost in the lingering dread that clung to me like a shadow. We decided to leave the basement alone, the room that had once been a sanctuary, now a place of torment and sorrow. But the memories of that night refused to fade, haunting my dreams and filling me with an unshakable fear of what lay beneath the surface of our new home. In the weeks that followed, the strange occurrences continued, though never as intense as that night. Doors would creak open on their own, and shadows seemed to move just beyond the reach of my flashlight. The heavy breathing and whispers were no longer confined to the basement, permeating every corner of the house, a constant reminder of the restless spirit that still lingered. Determined to find answers, I delved into the history of the house, uncovering the dark past that had been hidden for so long. The previous owner, Dr. Henry Caldwell, had been a renowned psychologist known for his groundbreaking but controversial methods. His dedication to his work had pushed him to the brink, and rumors circulated about the extreme measures he took to cure his patients. Tragically, many of his patients had vanished without a trace, their disappearances shrouded in mystery and fear. It was said that Dr. Caldwell's obsession had driven him to conduct experiments that blurred the line between sanity and madness, leaving a trail of sorrow and unanswered questions in his wake. The basement, once his personal study and storage area, had been the site of his most harrowing experiments, where the boundary between life and death had been shattered. As I pieced together the fragments of his troubled past, the truth became undeniable. The restless spirit I had encountered was none other than Dr. Caldwell himself, forever trapped in the confines of the house, his tortured soul unable to find peace. The symbols in the basement were remnants of his dark rituals, a desperate attempt to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Now twisted and corrupted by his own anguish, the realization hit me hard. Dr. Caldwell had been consumed by his work, his mind unraveling as he sought to unlock the secrets of the human psyche. The heavy breathing and sorrowful gaze were echoes of his own torment, a reflection of the pain he had inflicted upon himself and others in his quest for knowledge. Determined to help him find peace, I returned to the basement one last time, armed with the knowledge I had uncovered. The symbols glowed faintly under the moonlight filtering through the basement window, their meaning clearer than ever. I began to recite the incantations I had found in Dr. Caldwell's journals, my voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at my insides. As the final words left my lips, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, the shadows dissipating into the night. The heavy breathing ceased, replaced by a serene silence that filled the room. The mirror stood still, no longer reflecting the sorrowful gaze of a tortured soul, but my own reflection staring back at me with a newfound sense of understanding. I left the basement that night, the house no longer a place of torment but a sanctuary of peace. The strange occurrences ceased, the whispers fading into the background as Dr. Caldwell's spirit found the rest it had long been denied. Our home became a place of healing, a testament to the power of compassion and the enduring resilience of the human spirit. But the memory of that night remains, a haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead, and the souls that linger in the shadows, waiting for someone to offer them a chance at peace. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the trees on a silent night, I catch a faint whisper on the breeze, a sorrowful plea that sends a chill down my spine, a lingering echo of the restless spirit of Dr. Henry Caldwell. Story number 2. Echoes of the Mind. The moment my wife, Laura, and our 2 children, Emily and Jack, stepped into the old house on Willow Lane in Michigan, we felt a mix of excitement and unease. It stood solitary, its Victorian architecture grand yet weary, with ivy crawling up its stone facade and windows that mirrored the heavy gray skies typical of our Midwest winters. The house had belonged to Dr. Henry Caldwell, a renowned psychologist whose methods were both celebrated and whispered about in hushed tones among the local community. Dr. Caldwell was a man of intellect and mystery, known for his unconventional therapies that pushed the boundaries of psychological treatment. His success rates were impressive, yet there were always rumors, subtle hints of patients vanishing, odd occurrences in his practice, and an unsettling presence that lingered in his home long after his death. We had purchased the house after it had been on the market for months, drawn by its spacious rooms and serene surroundings. The moving process was hectic but uneventful, until we began to settle into our new home. Laura, ever the organizer, decided that the basement needed thorough cleaning. It was a large, dimly lit space that once served as Dr. Caldwell's personal study and storage area. One chilly Saturday morning, as the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, Laura and I descended the creaky wooden stairs to the basement. Emily and Jack stayed upstairs, engrossed in their new bedrooms decorated with cheerful winter motifs. The basement smelled of mildew and old wood, the air thick and unwelcoming. As we navigated through stacks of dusty boxes and forgotten furniture, Laura stumbled upon a heavy, iron-bound door hidden behind a tattered curtain. "Look at this," she called out, her voice tinged with curiosity and apprehension. I approached the door, noticing the intricate carvings that adorned its surface, symbols that seemed almost ritualistic, intertwined with psychological motifs. With a deep breath, Laura pushed the door open, revealing a small, windowless room. Inside stood a solitary wooden bed with a worn leather straitjacket draped over it, and beside it, an array of strange devices that looked both archaic and sinister. "This must have been his treatment area," Laura whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the grim scene. As we explored further, we found shelves lined with old medical journals and notes, many filled with Dr. Caldwell's meticulous handwriting. Among them was a diary, its pages yellowed and brittle. I carefully opened it, scanning the entries that detailed his experiments and the extreme measures he employed to treat his patients. The last few entries became increasingly frantic, speaking of restless spirits and the thin veil between sanity and madness. "We need to call the authorities," Laura said, her voice shaking. "There's something wrong here." Before I could respond, a cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing our flashlights and plunging us into darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled to turn them back on, but the power remained stubbornly out. Suddenly, the air grew heavy with an oppressive presence, and we could hear faint whispers echoing through the basement. Emily and Jack began to stir upstairs. Sensing our distress, Laura grabbed my arm, pulling me towards the stairs, but the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping us inside. The temperature dropped further, our breaths visible in the icy air as the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "We need to get out," I urged, trying to remain calm despite the fear clawing at my chest. But every time we moved towards the door, shadows seemed to stretch and twist, blocking our path. The room felt alive, pulsating with the lingering anguish of those who had suffered under Dr. Caldwell's care. In a desperate attempt to break free, I grabbed the diary and threw it against the wall. The impact reverberated through the room, and for a moment, everything went silent. But as soon as the book hit the ground, the whispers returned, louder and more chaotic, filling the basement with an overwhelming sense of despair. Emily's voice broke through the cacophony. "Dad, help us!" Determined to escape, Laura and I pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The oppressive presence pressed down on us, making it difficult to breathe. Suddenly, the strange devices around the room began to move on their own, gears turning, lights flickering, and mechanical parts whirring to life. The room transformed into a nightmarish laboratory, the symbols on the walls glowing with an unholy light. A shadowy figure materialized before us, its form indistinct yet undeniably human, pointed towards the bed, where the straitjacket hung like a trophy. "You shouldn't have come here," it intoned, its voice a haunting blend of sorrow and menace. Laura and I backed away, our minds racing to find a logical explanation. But logic had no place in the face of such supernatural terror. The figure began to advance, its presence overwhelming, the air thick with the scent of fear and despair. I could feel its eyes boring into me, sensing every ounce of my dread. "We need to leave," I whispered, pulling Laura towards the door once more. As we moved, the basement seemed to shift around us, the walls closing in, the symbols on the floor now a maze we couldn't navigate. The whispers turned into anguished cries, the cries into screams that echoed through the very foundation of the house. In a final act of desperation, I pushed against the door with all my might, the wood splintering under the force. Light flooded the basement as the door gave way, and we tumbled out into the main hall, gasping for breath. The oppressive atmosphere lifted instantly, replaced by the cold, crisp air of the winter night. Without looking back, we ran upstairs, grabbing Emily and Jack and fleeing the house as fast as we could. The cold air whipped against our faces, the snow muffling our footsteps as we made our way back to the safety of our car. Once inside, we sat in stunned silence, the reality of what we had experienced sinking in. "We can't stay here," Laura said, her voice trembling. "There's something evil in this house." We packed our belongings in a frantic rush, the need to leave overpowering any remaining sense of logic. As we drove away, the house on Willow Lane receded into the distance, its silhouette a dark reminder of the horrors we had uncovered. But even as we left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us, its presence lingering like a shadow in our minds. In the weeks that followed, we tried to piece together the fragments of our terrifying experience. The diary revealed the extent of Dr. Caldwell's obsession with pushing the boundaries of psychological treatment, his methods growing increasingly extreme until he crossed into the realm of the supernatural. Patients had reported seeing apparitions, hearing voices, and experiencing moments of sheer terror before vanishing without a trace. The town of Willow Creek was tight-lipped, many of the older residents confirming the rumors but offering no concrete explanations. Some believed that Dr. Caldwell had opened a gateway to the spirit world, a doorway that now allowed restless souls to wander freely, trapped between life and death. Laura and I sought help from paranormal investigators and historians, but their findings only deepened the mystery. The house was a nexus of supernatural activity, a place where the past refused to stay buried. Each night, we were haunted by nightmares of the basement, the shadowy figure, and the anguished whispers that seemed to follow us wherever we went. Ultimately, we made the difficult decision to leave Willow Lane, selling the house and moving to a new location where the echoes of the past couldn't reach us. But the memories of that winter lingered, a constant reminder of the thin line between the living and the dead, and the enduring power of unresolved trauma. Years later, I still find myself haunted by the events of 2023, the images of the basement, the diary's desperate pleas, and the shadowy figure's ominous warnings remain etched in my mind. Laura and I have built a new life, but the scars of that experience run deep, a testament to the horrors that lie hidden in the forgotten corners of the world. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls through the trees and the snow blankets the earth. I can almost hear the faint whispers of the restless souls of Willow Lane, calling out from the shadows. A chilling reminder that some places hold secrets too dark to uncover and spirits too restless to find peace. Story number 3. Whispers Beneath the Sanctuary. The first time I heard about St. Michael's Church, it was over a decade ago, shared in hushed tones at the local cafe in our small Massachusetts town. It stood on the outskirts, nestled between overgrown fields and dense woods. Its once grand facade now marred by time and neglect. The stained glass windows, now shattered and covered in grime, hinted at the beauty that had long since faded. Legends swirled around the old church, stories of whispered prayers that never reached the heavens and shadows that moved with a life of their own. As a journalism student with a penchant for the paranormal, the abandoned church was a siren song I couldn't resist. In the winter of 2024, my friends Emily, Sarah, and Mike and I decided to explore St. Michael's for our senior project. We were drawn not just by the allure of uncovering hidden histories, but by the eerie fascination that the church exuded. Equipped with flashlights, cameras, and a healthy dose of skepticism, we set out on a cold December evening, the air crisp with the promise of snow. The journey to St. Michael's was uneventful, the path leading us through a maze of barren trees and frost-covered ground. As we approached, the church loomed before us, its silhouette stark against the fading light. The wooden doors, once ornate, were now warped and hanging ajar, inviting us into the darkness within. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of mold and decaying wood. Our flashlights pierced through the darkness, revealing rows of pews covered in dust and cobwebs. The grand altar, once a place of reverence, stood empty, its marble surface cracked and stained. We wandered through the nave, our footsteps echoing ominously in the vast, silent space. "Let's check out the basement," Emily suggested, her voice betraying a mixture of excitement and apprehension. According to Mrs. Thompson, the caretaker before she moved away, the basement had been used as a storage area in the 1800s, holding relics and supplies for the church's daily operations. As we descended the creaky wooden stairs, the temperature seemed to drop, the air growing colder and more oppressive. The basement was a sprawling room, filled with old crates, broken furniture, and stacks of forgotten objects. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. As we explored, Sarah stumbled upon an old wooden box hidden beneath a pile of debris. Intrigued, she carefully lifted it, the hinges creaking in protest. "Guys, check this out," she called softly, holding the box up to the light. We gathered around as she opened it, revealing a collection of old photographs and a leather-bound journal. The photos were sepia-toned, depicting families and individuals who had likely been part of the church community centuries ago. My fingers traced the faces, feeling an inexplicable connection to the people staring back at me from the faded images. Mike picked up the journal, flipping through the yellowed pages. The entries were written in elegant script, chronicling daily activities and personal reflections. But as we delved deeper, the tone shifted. The later entries became frantic, filled with mentions of restless spirits and unexplained phenomena. "I think this is what Mrs. Thompson was talking about," Mike said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She mentioned something about souls that never found peace." As we absorbed the journal's contents, a sudden noise shattered the silence, a soft thud coming from the far end of the basement. We froze, hearts pounding, as the sound repeated, rhythmic and deliberate. Without warning, the flashlight beams converged on a corner of the room, revealing strange, cryptic symbols etched into the floorboards. "What is that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, a chill swept through the basement, and the temperature plummeted. My breath became visible in the frigid air as a sense of being watched enveloped us. We exchanged uneasy glances, the rational part of my mind struggling to find explanations for the supernatural occurrences unfolding around us. Suddenly, a candle on a nearby table ignited on its own, the flame flickering wildly despite the absence of wind. The basement was plunged into an eerie glow, the shadows morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to reach out towards us. The room felt alive, pulsing with an unseen energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Guys, we need to leave," Sarah urged, her eyes wide with fear. But as we turned to make our way back up the stairs, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping us inside. Panic set in as we pounded on the door, screaming for help. But our voices were swallowed by the oppressive silence of the basement. Then, the whispers began, soft, indistinct murmurs that filled the room, growing louder and more urgent. It was as if the very walls were trying to communicate, their voices echoing the words from the journal. "Run away before it's too late." The symbols on the floor began to glow, the light intensifying until it felt like the basement was enveloped in pure white. The shadows danced frenetically, and the whispers transformed into anguished cries that pierced through my soul. I could feel an invisible force pressing down on us, its intent malevolent and unforgiving. Desperate to escape, I grabbed the journal and hurled it towards the wall, hoping to disrupt whatever curse or spirit was tormenting us. The journal hit the ground with a loud thud, the pages scattering like torn leaves in a storm. The basement seemed to react instantly. Symbols flickered and vanished, and the oppressive atmosphere began to lift, the whispers fading into silence. Breathing heavily, we scrambled to our feet and raced towards the stairs. The basement door creaked open, revealing the dim light of the corridor. Without looking back, we fled the house, the cold night air biting at our faces as we sprinted towards the safety of our cars. As we sped away, the church faded into the distance, its dark silhouette a haunting reminder of the night's terrors. We didn't speak on the drive home, each of us lost in our own thoughts, the images of the basement and the restless spirits etched into our minds. In the days that followed, we tried to process what had happened, sharing our story with friends and family who dismissed it as a product of our imaginations fueled by the eerie setting. But the truth was undeniable. We had encountered something beyond our understanding, a glimpse into the tormented souls that lingered within the abandoned walls of St. Michael's. Determined to find answers, I reached out to local historians and paranormal investigators, piecing together the dark history of the church. It had been built in the early 1800s, serving as both a place of worship and a hospital. During its operation, numerous tragedies had occurred, families torn apart by disease, lives lost to the unforgiving wilderness, and unexplained deaths that left the community in mourning. The restless spirits we had encountered were likely the remnants of those who had never found peace, their sorrow and anguish binding them to the physical world. The symbols in the basement were part of an old ritual, a desperate attempt to communicate with or appease the spirits, now twisted and corrupted by time and tragedy. Our experience at St. Michael's became the cornerstone of our project, a first-hand account of the supernatural phenomena that plagued the abandoned church. But beyond the academic interest, it left an indelible mark on each of us, a lingering fear of the unknown and a deeper understanding of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead. Years later, I still think about that night, the cold, oppressive basement, the flickering candle, the anguished whispers. It serves as a reminder that some places hold secrets too dark to uncover, and that the spirits of the past continue to haunt the present, yearning for the peace they never found in life. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the trees on a silent night, I catch a faint whisper carried on the breeze, a sorrowful plea that sends chills down my spine. It's a haunting echo of the restless souls of St. Michael's, a testament to the enduring power of loss and the unending quest for peace. Story number 4. Shadows of the basement. The snow had been falling steadily since I arrived in Montana, cloaking the small town of Willow Creek in a thick, silent blanket. I'd chosen this secluded motel for its rustic charm and the promise of solitude, a perfect retreat from the chaos of city life. Little did I know, the tranquility of winter would soon give way to a nightmare I couldn't escape. My name is David Harris, and I consider myself a rational man, a journalist by profession. I've always sought logical explanations for the unexplained. But that decision to stay alone in that old motel was about to challenge everything I thought I knew. The motel was an old establishment, built in the early 1900s, with wooden floors that creaked under every step and antique furnishings that whispered stories of bygone eras. The owner, Mrs. Thompson, was a sweet elderly lady who greeted me with a warm smile and a firm handshake. She handed me the keys to room 3, her eyes lingering on mine with a hint of caution I couldn't quite decipher. "Room 3 has a lovely view of the mountains," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." I settled into my room, unpacking my bags and preparing for a weekend of writing and reflection. The room was cozy, with a large window framing the snow-covered landscape and a fireplace that added a comforting warmth to the otherwise chilly interior. As night fell, the wind howled outside, making the windows rattle ominously. Around midnight, a persistent feeling of unease settled over me. It wasn't the first time I'd felt it, but this time, it was stronger, almost palpable. Deciding to shake off the creeping dread, I grabbed my jacket and headed downstairs to explore the motel. The lobby was dimly lit, the soft glow of the chandelier casting eerie shadows on the walls. Mrs. Thompson was nowhere to be seen, and the usual hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was absent. I made my way to the basement, recalling her mention of some old toys she kept stored there for children's playdates long ago. As I approached the narrow staircase leading to the basement, the temperature seemed to drop, my breath visible in the icy air. The steps groaned under my weight, protesting my descent into the unknown. The basement door was slightly ajar, inviting yet foreboding. Pushing the door open, I was greeted by a musty smell and the dim light of a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The room was cluttered with old furniture, broken toys, and stacks of dusty boxes. My flashlight pierced through the darkness, illuminating the chaos of forgotten memories. I began to search for the toy Mrs. Thompson had mentioned, rifling through boxes until I found an old, worn teddy bear. As I held it up, I noticed strange markings etched into the wooden floorboards, symbols I couldn't recognize, arranged in a pattern that felt disturbingly intentional. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine as I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing from the far end of the basement. My heart raced as I turned towards the noise, expecting to see one of the motel's maintenance staff. But the basement was empty, no sign of anyone or anything. Before I could process what was happening, the old swing chair in the corner of the room began to sway violently. Despite the absence of any breeze, my flashlight flickered, casting distorted shadows that danced across the walls. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if unseen eyes were watching my every move. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. The only response was the relentless swaying of the chair and the faint whisper of voices that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Determined to uncover the source of the disturbances, I approached the swing chair, my footsteps echoing loudly in the silent basement. As I reached out to steady it, the room plunged into darkness. The flashlight had died, leaving me in complete blackness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for the flashlight, my hands shaking uncontrollably. When the light finally flickered back on, I was horrified to see that the symbols on the floor had changed. They now formed grotesque faces, their mouths open in silent screams, eyes hollow and accusing. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the supernatural occurrences. But logic offered no answers. A sudden, deafening crash echoed through the basement as the swing chair shattered into 1,000 pieces, the remnants flying across the room with deadly precision. I ducked instinctively, narrowly avoiding the flying debris. My pulse hammered in my ears as I tried to steady my breathing, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on me. In the midst of the chaos, I spotted something moving in the corner of my eye, a shadowy figure, fleeting and indistinct, slipping through the debris with unnatural speed. I lunged towards it, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind only the lingering sense of malevolence. Terrified, I fled the basement, my legs carrying me as fast as they could go up the stairs and back to my room. The door slammed shut behind me, and the oppressive silence of the night seemed to mock my fear. I collapsed onto the bed, my body trembling, my mind reeling from the events I had just witnessed. The next morning, I tried to rationalize what had happened, blaming it on the old building and the isolation of the winter months. But the memory of the symbols, the whispering voices, and the phantom figure haunted me. Determined to find answers, I approached Mrs. Thompson, hoping she could shed some light on the house's dark history. Her face paled as I recounted my experience, her eyes reflecting a depth of sorrow that seemed to reach into the very soul of the motel. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," she said softly. "This place has seen its share of tragedies. Before it was a motel, it was indeed a hospital. Many lives were lost here, and some say their spirits never found peace." I felt a chill run down my spine, the weight of her words sinking in. The symbols in the basement, the phantom figure, they were echoes of the past, remnants of lives shattered by sorrow and despair. The broken swing chair and the shifting symbols were manifestations of the restless spirits that still lingered, unable to move on from the tragedies that had unfolded within those walls. That night, couldn't sleep. The haunting memories of the basement seared into my mind. I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. The malevolent presence that had tormented me was a constant reminder that some places hold secrets too dark to uncover, and some spirits too restless to let go. The following morning, Laura and I packed our belongings in silence, the motel room feeling like a cage that we couldn't escape from. As we drove away, the motel receding into the distance, I glanced back at the old building, its silhouette ominous against the snowy landscape. I couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits were watching us, their sorrowful eyes following our departure. Months have passed since that harrowing winter, and I still find myself haunted by the memories of that night. The symbols, the phantom figure, the broken swing chair, they remain etched in my mind, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Sometimes, on cold, quiet nights, I swear I can hear the faint whispers of the restless spirits, calling out for peace that will never come. I've come to understand that the old motel on Maple Street holds more than just memories. It holds the pain and anguish of lives lost, their spirits forever entwined with the very fabric of the place. It's a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some places better left undisturbed. As I sit here, recounting my experience, I can't help but feel a lingering presence watching from the shadows. The story of that haunted basement serves as a testament to the enduring power of the past, and the restless spirits that dwell in forgotten places, waiting for someone to acknowledge their existence and offer a semblance of peace. Story number 5. Shadows in the basement. The abandoned building on Harbor Street had stood silent for decades, its windows boarded up and graffiti-covered walls a testament to years of neglect. As the night shift security guard, I'd grown accustomed to the eerie stillness that enveloped the structure. Most nights were uneventful, filled with the hum of my radio and the occasional creak of the old building settling into its long slumber. But that night, something felt different, something that would change my perception of reality forever. I'm Michael Lawson, and securing abandoned buildings wasn't the most glamorous job, but it paid the bills. The Harbor Street building had been a warehouse once, bustling with activity and life. Now, it was just another forgotten relic in the heart of Boston. My routine was simple: patrol the perimeter, check for any signs of trespassers, and ensure that everything remained as undisturbed as possible until morning. It was a particularly cold December night in 2023. The wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it the scent of damp concrete and decaying wood. Wrapped in my thick jacket, I made my way to the main entrance, flashlight in hand. The night was dark, the sky obscured by heavy clouds that threatened to unleash a storm at any moment. The streets were empty, the only sounds the distant wail of sirens and the occasional bark of a stray dog. As I approached the building, the full moon broke through the clouds, casting an ethereal glow on the structure. Shadows danced across the facade, creating an almost hypnotic pattern that made my skin crawl. I shook off the unease, reminding myself that it was just the play of light and darkness. Another uneventful night, I muttered to myself, stepping inside. The interior was just as I'd expected, dusty, cluttered, and devoid of any signs of recent activity. I made my way through the main hall, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating forgotten crates and broken machinery. After patrolling the ground floor, I decided to check the basement, a place that always gave me the creeps. The basement door was located at the end of a long, narrow hallway. I could hear faint noises emanating from below, but I told myself it was probably just the building's plumbing acting up or perhaps a rat scurrying about. Taking a deep breath, I descended the creaky wooden stairs, each step groaning under my weight. The basement was cold, the air thick with moisture and the smell of mold. My flashlight beam swept across the room, revealing old storage boxes, rusty tools, and remnants of past operations. It was then that I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible noise, like footsteps echoing through the vast space. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. Probably just my imagination, I whispered, trying to steady my nerves. But the sound persisted, growing slightly louder and more deliberate. Someone or something was moving through the basement. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" My voice sounded hollow in the empty room, and no response came. The footsteps continued, now accompanied by a faint whisper that sent chills down my spine. I turned my flashlight towards the source, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. That's when I saw it, a fleeting shadow, slipping past a stack of old crates. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, but the figure was gone. Get a grip, Michael, I chided myself, shaking off the fear. I decided to investigate further, cautiously making my way towards where I thought I saw the shadow. As I approached, the temperature seemed to drop, my breath visible in the icy air. The basement door at the far end of the room suddenly slammed shut with a deafening bang, reverberating through the space. My heart raced as I spun around, trying to open the door, but it was locked tight. Panic surged through me as the realization hit. Something was trapping me inside. The whispers grew louder, now forming indistinct words that sent shivers down my spine. I could feel eyes watching me from the darkness, the oppressive presence pressing down on me. My flashlight flickered, the beam wavering as if struggling against an unseen force. Desperate to escape, I backed away from the door, searching for another way out. That's when I noticed the markings on the floor. Strange, cryptic symbols etched into the concrete, glowing faintly under the light of my flashlight. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the drawings, but they offered no answers, only adding to the growing sense of dread. Suddenly, the objects in the basement began to move on their own. Boxes toppled over, tools clattered to the ground, and shadows twisted into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock my fear. The whispers turned into anguished cries, echoing through the basement like the tormented souls of the damned. I could feel an invisible presence closing in, its intent malevolent and unforgiving. In a moment of sheer terror, I sprinted towards the basement door, slamming into the wall as the door remained stubbornly closed. My pulse quickened, and my breaths came in short, desperate gasps. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to press down on me, making it hard to breathe, as the whispers morphed into chants, their meanings lost to time but their intent clear. Just as I felt I couldn't endure another moment, a force seemed to push me back, giving me the strength to leap towards the door. With a final, frantic effort, I broke free, stumbling up the stairs and slamming the basement door shut behind me. The sounds ceased instantly, the basement returning to its former silence as if nothing had happened. Heart still racing, I leaned against the wall, trying to collect my thoughts. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from my wife, Laura, reminding me to head home before midnight. I glanced at the clock, 11:55 p.m., with a mix of relief and lingering fear. I made my way back to the main hall, casting one last look over my shoulder. As I reached the exit, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A series of old photographs scattered on the floor near the basement door. They depicted a family, smiling and happy, but with an eerie twist, their eyes seemed to follow me, filled with sorrow and desperation. One photo in particular stood out. It was of a man who bore a striking resemblance to my late father. Taken decades ago, the realization hit me hard. The house had been more than just an abandoned building. It had been a place of tragedy and lost souls, their pain and anguish still lingering in the shadows. I felt a deep sense of empathy for the spirits trapped within, understanding now why the basement had resisted my presence so fiercely. With a heavy heart, I left the building, the night air cold against my skin. The experience left me shaken, questioning the thin veil between the living and the dead. From that night on, I never worked the night shift at the Harbor Street building again. The memories of the basement's whispers and the ghostly apparitions haunted my dreams, a constant reminder of the unseen forces that dwell in forgotten places. Laura noticed the change in me, the haunted look in my eyes and the nervousness that seemed to linger. I shared with her the events of that night, the strange symbols, the moving objects, and the chilling encounters with the past. Together, we sought to find peace, honoring the spirits that had once called the old building home. The house on Harbor Street remains abandoned, the secrets locked away beneath layers of dust and decay. But sometimes, on cold winter nights, I hear the faint echo of footsteps and the soft whispers of lost souls, reminding me that some places hold memories too painful to forget and shadows too dark to ignore. I've come to understand that the true horror wasn't in the ghostly apparitions or the unexplained phenomena, but in the realization that the past never truly dies. It lingers, waiting for someone to acknowledge its existence, to offer a hand of compassion and understanding. And in that moment, I found a deeper connection to the spirits of the forgotten, forever bound to the shadows of the old Harbor Street building. Story number 6. Whispers beneath the floorboards. When my wife, Laura, and our 2 children, Emma and Jack, decided to move to Illinois, we were searching for a fresh start. The bustling city life had become overwhelming, and the promise of a quiet suburban neighborhood seemed like the perfect remedy. We found an old Victorian-style house nestled on Maple Street, its charm evident despite the layers of peeling paint and overgrown garden. Little did we know, the house held secrets that would soon turn our lives upside down. The house had once been a hospital, a fact we learned from the previous owners who mentioned renovations were underway before they abruptly left. Intrigued by its history, I spent evenings poring over old records, trying to piece together the house's past. But the more I delved, the more unsettling details emerged. The hospital had been closed abruptly in the late 1980s after a series of unexplained incidents. Stories of patients vanishing and strange noises permeated the town's folklore. But nothing concrete was ever proven. As winter approached, the days grew shorter, and the nights longer. Our cozy home began to feel colder, not just from the dropping temperatures but from an inexplicable chill that seemed to seep into our bones. It started with minor disturbances, doors creaking open on their own, faint whispers echoing through the halls, and shadows dancing just beyond the edge of our vision. Laura dismissed them as the quirks of an old house, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. One particularly frigid night in December, the disturbances intensified. Emma and Jack were asleep in their bedrooms when I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the basement. My heart pounded as I descended the creaky wooden stairs, flashlight in hand. The basement was a cavernous space, filled with old medical equipment and dusty storage boxes. The tapping seemed to emanate from deeper within, prompting me to investigate further. As I reached the far end of the basement, my flashlight caught something unusual beneath the floorboards, a slight indentation, as if a hidden door had been concealed for decades. My curiosity piqued. I knelt down and began to pry at the edges. After several minutes of effort, the floorboards gave way, revealing a narrow, dark passageway leading into the unknown. Summoning all my courage, I squeezed through the opening, the cold air brushing against my face. The passageway was cramped, the walls lined with strange, cryptic drawings that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. Symbols I couldn't comprehend adorned the walls, and scattered around were various old objects, medical instruments, faded photographs, and personal items long forgotten. One photo, in particular, caught my eye. It was a black and white image of a family, much like ours, but with an unsettling twist. The father bore an uncanny resemblance to me. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was a picture of my late father, who had passed away years ago. Confusion and fear welled up inside me. How was his photo here? And why did the house, our new home, seem to hold a connection to his past? As I examined the room, I found a dusty journal lying atop an old table. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with handwritten notes that detailed the lives of the families who had lived in the house before us. The entries became increasingly erratic, speaking of voices in the night, shadows that moved independently, and an oppressive presence that watched from the darkness. A particular entry stood out. The spirits of the past linger here, unable to find peace. They watch and whisper, waiting for someone to acknowledge their existence. If you hear the footsteps and feel the gaze, beware the secrets beneath the floorboards. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Our father had been connected to this house in ways we could never have imagined. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to document everything and share it with Laura. But as I retraced my steps back to the main basement area, the temperature dropped drastically, my breath visible in the icy air. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang, plunging me into darkness. The whispers grew louder, now accompanied by the sound of heavy breathing and footsteps that echoed menacingly around me. Panic set in as I fumbled for the light switch, but the flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in complete darkness. I heard it then, a voice, distinct and haunting, calling my name. Run, before it's too late. The words reverberated through the basement, sending shivers down my spine. Shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, pressing in from all sides. I felt an invisible force trying to hold me back, this presence suffocating. Desperate to escape, I pounded on the door, shouting for help, but my voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. The footsteps grew louder, circling me, as the whispers turned into anguished cries. In a final act of desperation, I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy metal tray, and swung it at the door. The tray connected with a loud clang, but instead of breaking through, it seemed to merge with the wall, the sound echoing unnaturally. Just as I thought all hope was lost, the basement door flew open, and I was thrust back into the main basement area. Gasping for breath, I scrambled up the stairs, the whispers and footsteps fading behind me. I burst into the living room, my heart racing, and found Laura standing there, her face pale with fear. "Jake, are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, unable to find my voice. The room was silent once more, but the feeling of being watched lingered like a shadow. We exchanged a worried glance, both of us grappling with the reality of what had just happened. Over the next few weeks, the strange phenomena continued. The footsteps and whispers became a nightly torment, each night more intense than the last. Emma and Jack were terrified, insisting they saw figures lurking in their rooms and heard voices calling their names. Laura and I were at a loss, torn between rational explanations and the undeniable evidence of something supernatural haunting our home. One night, determined to confront the mystery, Laura and I decided to return to the basement. this time armed with cameras and recording equipment. We hoped to capture the phenomena and find a rational explanation. As we descended the stairs, the air grew colder, and the oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on us. We reached the secret passageway once more, the strange drawings and old objects still intact. This time, I placed a camera in the corner, pointing it towards the floorboards, while Laura began documenting the drawings. As we worked, the temperature plummeted, our breaths visible in the frigid air. Suddenly, the floorboards began to tremble, and a faint light flickered beneath them. We watched in horror as the floorboards parted once again, revealing the hidden room below. The room was illuminated by a ghostly light, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the walls. The symbols on the walls seemed to come alive, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. Then, the apparition appeared, a figure dressed in old-fashioned clothing, his face a haunting reflection of my own. He stood silently, his eyes filled with sorrow and pain. The realization struck me hard. This was the spirit of my father, trapped within the house, unable to move on. "Help us," he whispered, his voice echoing through the room. "Help us find peace." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached out, desperate to communicate. "Dad, I'm so sorry. We'll help you," pleaded. But the apparition began to fade, his form dissolving into the shadows. As he vanished, the room grew colder, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly. The symbols on the walls stopped pulsating, and the strange drawings returned to their dormant state. We knew then that we had to honor the spirits trapped within the house, to help them find the peace they so desperately sought. In the days that followed, we reached out to paranormal experts and historians, piecing together the tragic history of the house. It had once been a family home before being converted into a hospital, where countless patients had suffered and perished. The spirits of those who had lost their lives lingered, bound to the house by unfinished business and unresolved grief. With the help of our newfound knowledge, we performed cleansing rituals and created memorials for the lost souls. Slowly, the disturbances began to subside. The footsteps and whispers faded, replaced by a sense of calm that had long been missing from our home. But the memory of those haunted nights lingered, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. We learned to coexist with the spirits, honoring their memories and ensuring their stories were never forgotten. The house on Maple Street became more than just our home. It became a sanctuary for restless souls, a place where the past and present intertwined in a delicate balance. Years later, as I sit in the now peaceful living room, I reflect on the ordeal that brought us closer together and taught us the true meaning of family and compassion. The house is still old and weathered, but it no longer holds the shadows of the past. Instead, it stands as a testament to the enduring power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. And sometimes, on quiet winter nights, I catch a faint whisper on the wind, a soft, sorrowful call that sends a chill down my spine. I smile, knowing that we've done our part to help the lost souls find peace, and that our home is now a place of serenity and remembrance. Story number 7. Echoes in the Basement. The old house on Elm Street had always been a subject of local legend. Tucked away in a forgotten corner of New York, its boarded-up windows and overgrown garden gave it an aura of abandonment that deterred even the most curious passers-by. My friends and I, fueled by a mix of teenage bravado and a thirst for adventure, decided that summer of 2023 was the perfect time to uncover the secrets hidden within its decaying walls. I'm Jake Thompson, and along with my closest friends, Mia, Alex, and Sam, we had always sought out the unexplained, the eerie, the thrill of the unknown. When we heard about the abandoned house on Elm Street, rumors of strange occurrences and disappearances piqued our interest. Determined to prove that the stories were nothing more than exaggerated tales, we planned our expedition for a warm August evening. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, we approached the house. The air was thick with anticipation and the scent of damp earth. The front gate, once grand, was now rusted and barely hanging onto its hinges. Pushing it open with some effort, we made our way to the front door, our flashlights cutting through the encroaching darkness. Inside, the house was a time capsule of a bygone era. Dust-covered furniture lay strewn across the rooms, and cobwebs clung to every corner. The floorboards creaked under our weight as we navigated through the maze of empty halls, each step echoing ominously. We split up to cover more ground, agreeing to regroup in the living room after a thorough search. I found myself drawn to the staircase that led to the basement, a place we had all heard was the epicenter of the house's eerie reputation. Taking a deep breath, I descended the narrow steps, the air growing colder with each step down. The basement door, heavy and imposing, loomed before me. As I reached out to push it open, a chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to proceed. The basement was a shadowy expanse, the beam of my flashlight revealing remnants of long-abandoned belongings. Old furniture, broken appliances, and scattered personal items hinted at lives abruptly interrupted. But what caught my attention were the strange marks etched into the wooden floor, dark, jagged lines that resembled dried blood. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of them. Suddenly, a soft whisper echoed through the room. "Run away before it's too late." I spun around, flashlight darting across the space. But there was no one there. The words lingered in the air, sending a shiver down my spine. I called out to my friends, but my voice sounded distant and muffled. Before I could react, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang, plunging me into complete darkness. Panic set in as the temperature seemed to drop further, my breath visible in the frigid air. I fumbled with the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, accompanied by the sound of heavy breathing and footsteps that echoed around me. Desperate to escape, I turned to find another way out, my flashlight flickering ominously. Objects began to move on their own, chairs scraping against the floor, boxes toppling over, and eerie shadows dancing along the walls. The sense of being watched intensified, a malevolent presence pressing down on me from all sides. In the midst of the chaos, I spotted something glinting under a pile of old newspapers, a torn piece of paper. I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I unfolded the brittle sheet. The message was clear: "Run away before it's too late." The words were scrawled in hastily written letters. The ink smudged and faded. A cold wind swept through the basement, extinguishing my flashlight and plunging me into darkness once more. The whispers turned into anguished cries, and the footsteps grew louder, now accompanied by the unmistakable sound of someone, or something, moving swiftly around me. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the horror unfolding before me, but logic failed to grasp the supernatural terror that gripped my soul. Summoning every ounce of courage, I clawed at the door, my nails scraping against the wood until bloodied and raw. The screams of my friends, Mia, Alex, and Sam, echoed through the halls as they heard my distress. Their voices merged with the haunting whispers, creating a cacophony of fear that reverberated through the entire house. Just when I thought I couldn't endure another moment, the basement door burst open, flooding the room with light. My friends rushed in, their faces pale with fear and eyes wide with the horror they had witnessed. Without hesitation, we fled the house, the oppressive atmosphere of the basement following us like a shadow. Outside, gasping for breath, we huddled together under the flickering porch light. The house stood silent once more, its secrets hidden within its decaying walls. We didn't look back, but the feeling of being watched lingered, a reminder that some places hold darkness that should never be disturbed. In the days that followed, we tried to rationalize the experience, dismissing it as an overactive imagination fueled by the house's ominous reputation. But the torn letter we found and the vivid memories of the basement's horrors refused to fade. We shared our story with others, hoping to warn them of the house's malevolent presence. But many dismissed us as crazy, unable to comprehend the reality of our ordeal. The house on Elm Street remains abandoned to this day, a silent sentinel of the horrors that lie within. Locals still speak of the strange phenomena, and those brave enough to venture near claim to hear the whispers in the wind. A chilling reminder of the night we uncovered the house's darkest secrets. Sometimes, late at night, I find myself staring into the darkness, haunted by the echoes of that night. The sensation of being watched never fully leaves me. A lingering fear that the house's malevolent presence is still out there, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting adventurers to uncover its terrifying truth. We never returned to Elm Street, and none of us have ever ventured near an abandoned house since. The experience taught us that some mysteries are better left unexplored, and that the darkness within certain places is a force not meant to be disturbed. But the memory of that night remains, a permanent scar etched into our souls, a testament to the haunting power of the unknown.